Well, good morning, everybody. There's kind of an interesting thing happening with some satellite-derived plant health vegetation index measuring, one of the big ones being the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, or NDVI. And it's kind of happening across the whole of the Northern Hemisphere. So I want to show you something on this website we look at quite a bit. I went ahead and I masked this to just show where there are croplands, all right? That's based off satellite estimates. I want to come into the United States, just show you something real quick. We know that the Corn Belt is setting new records for high NDVI, but the entirety of the United States is. So this is going to be our new kind of top side of the envelope here with how healthy the crops look across the entirety of the U.S. I want to show you Canada as well. Despite the large wildfires that are here, much farther to the north in the forested areas, which continue, Canada's NDVI across its main growing areas here in the prairie and also down here in this very productive region of Ontario, they are also above their historical averages and approaching the top of the envelope as of late. Other places in the Northern Hemisphere just to consider here. Remember how bad the drought was in France early that dropped their NDVI off so very low? Well, as we now finished July and got into early August, they've made a pretty big rebound there as well. And since we're over here, let's just take a quick look at Ukraine and get the data coming up here. Ukraine below where they were a year ago. And this line right in through here is where they were a year ago. So that is one area across the Northern Hemisphere that's struggling. But remember, as we watched the early summer drought take hold in Europe, it was primarily concentrated in this region. While we saw much of Russia, just take a look at where Russia's main growing areas are here. Take a look at Russia. Their NDVI values, here it comes, are actually above where they were a year ago. So it was kind of a west versus east setup. Okay, one last place over in North America, in the Northern Hemisphere. I want to take you over to China just to show you that across all of China's major growing areas since, late June, they are also setting a new record high in NDVI. And I think it's just important for us to kind of take that in across the Northern Hemisphere growing season. Now, very quickly, I'm just going to do a couple places across the Southern Hemisphere. Let's take China off. Let's come down to Argentina. Now, remember, it is midwinter in Argentina, but I just want to show you that lately they've popped back up here. They do grow a winter wheat crop in this area, of course. So I just wanted you to kind of see that. And if we go to Brazil, I know we've mentioned this before, but just to make a point, if you come back to this time period, April, May, June, that was the NDVI when the safrinha corn crop was at its best. And as a result, their NDVI is also new record high. And finally, I was just talking with a group last night in Australia and wanted to point out that after a pretty nasty drought in March, April, and into early May, some June and July precipitation has revived this area. And they do grow a lot of winter crops in Australia, which is, of course, in winter right now. So just want to point that out. This is just kind of an interesting way to look across the world and see things as it stands from satellite. Now, using ground-based radar and rain gauges, there's something I'm getting interested in. Well, let me rephrase it. There's something that I'm finding quite interesting. I'm not interested in it. I'd like to see it go away. And that is this region in through here that over the last couple of weeks has settled deeper into drought. We've got pockets of dryness there across parts of the Great Lakes into the Northeast, even some areas in the Mid-Atlantic. After having such wet conditions lately, or I should say before this, have gone dry. And we got to keep an eye on this part of Texas too. Now, the southwest monsoon, as I mentioned, has really been underperforming every single preseason forecast I gave it. There were a lot of indications that turned out to be false that I kind of bought into earlier in the year that I thought that southwest monsoon would be going in spades by now. I thought it'd be really cranking through. But as you can see, there are several areas that have been quite wet as of late. And if we just take this map and drop off the 2-week time frame and just come down to 1 week, this is how things look right now. So again, the flooding rains we watched come through this part of Georgia into North and South Carolina lately, a little bit into Virginia. You can see over the last week continued very dry in this area. Some of this filled in yesterday and some of this filled in this morning. This map only goes to 6 a.m. on August 6th. It's got a 1-day lag on it. And I just want to show you what's happened since then. The 24-hour total accumulated precipitation, we had yet another event that came into here following yesterday's event that went through this particular area. And some of the rainfall totals there were quite heavy this morning. And I'm curious if there was some hail in here as well. I'm recording this about the time that those storms were rolling through that area. Other places I want to point out, again, more flooding rains into parts of North Carolina. The models that picked up on this early was the European model especially, and around Raleigh, stretching into this part of Virginia, extremely wet conditions out of the storms that came through for the last 3 days. And finally, some rain up in Canada. Desperately needed. We got more coming for that area very, very soon. All right, here's the radar that starts last night and goes through early this morning. We can continue to see the rains here. The low that we're going to pay close attention to is curling up into Montana at the end of this animation. There were scattered storms in the monsoon. And then late in the overnight hours, watch the storms come through this part of Iowa. And these were the ones I was just mentioning here, adding a lot of very heavy rainfall to south central Iowa. Now, yesterday, I saved some of the satellite data, but I didn't put it in this. I'm not sure how many of you noticed, but they're out of that similar area, I should say, where the squall line went through yesterday. There were these beautiful gravity waves that rolled across parts of Nebraska. And it was a privilege and honor to be on Fox Weather last night talking about it with Ari. A lot of fun. I'm glad he calls me every once in a while to chat weather with him on Fox's Weather channel. So from there, let's kind of see where this is all going to be taking us, because over the next week, we have a sequence of lows that are going to drop quite a bit of rainfall here. And remember, this is the primary area right in through there where we've seen just prolific wildfires through Canada. We have more rain set, and some of this is coming right now through parts of Iowa into Illinois. But I'm getting very concerned about this drier tongue that's stretching from Texas into the kind of the mid-south region here where the Ohio and Mississippi rivers come together. Also where the Missouri River comes together. We do take note that parts of the Northeast are drier as well in this particular pattern. So with that being said, let's go have a look at a couple of things. This is the wildfire smoke from yesterday. It's the first of a sequence of lows goes through. And look at that. We're getting some storms that popped in here. This is going to certainly help. There is still a lot of wildfire smoke being dragged around in this, but still important to note that we are getting some help from Mother Nature on putting these fires out. Now, if you look at the overall flow, this is kind of a neat map. I've overlaid the mid-level wind field, so this is 500 millibar winds, but the color shading represents CAPE, or convective available potential energy. And what we're going to be watching over the next 3 days is going to be a sequence of areas here, then here, then here of severe weather risk. So the upper levels of the atmosphere feature a few different troughs of low pressure. That's the sequence of lows that I mentioned coming through the flow. The first one that just went through yesterday. Here's the next one that's going to come out of Montana in the northwest. And then we have a third one here we're going to have to keep a close eye on. The ridge to the south is very dry. That's why the CAPE values are low in here. And it's also extremely hot, easily eclipsing 100 degrees Fahrenheit multiple days in a row inside of this ridge. But out ahead of it, in fact, maybe it's easier if I just show you what the near surface winds are doing. We've got this pull of really good moisture from the Gulf, and it's just spreading that instability all throughout this area, which is giving us this multi-day severe weather threat across the northern plains into the upper Midwest. So if we go have a look, first of all, at that smoke, the smoke is actually tracing out what we're expecting the atmosphere to do for the next 48 hours. So there is the ridge. See the front that's coming through to clear this out? Watch this. Watch this just push through right in this area. Okay? That is the front that's going to initiate multiple rounds of storms across the northern plains and upper Midwest going forward. But we are going to push and concentrate that smoke out to the east of this next system coming through. Wildfires continue to be problematic in the southwest and into California especially. But we are getting contribution of the smoke across the rest of the country from Canada as well. So here it is. This is the Day 1 Storm Prediction Center outlook. That's the newest update. We got an enhanced risk across parts of North Dakota today, a broader area starting in Montana, getting all the way over to Minnesota. As we go into tomorrow, it's going to be right here in the Red River Valley of the North. And again, an enhanced risk there. And then out to Day 3, which would be Saturday, we're going to watch this move toward, the Mississippi River, getting over to parts of Iowa, Wisconsin, eventually pushing farther east of that. The models have not been well initialized. This has been a criticism I've had, and that's why I've not been showing them to you. So, for example, at 7 a.m. this morning, this is what the model said the precipitation pattern would look like. Now, just for reference, this is what it does look like. We'll just pause this, take you to the end. Okay, so we have some storms here, storms way down in this part of Iowa, and some in North Carolina. But the model suggested that there'd still be lingering storms here. It's not terrible, but it wasn't well initialized. That's all. It doesn't get the near-term convection. But I still, despite that, think it's got an idea about what to expect tonight. I believe these storms will likely all start off as singular celled, in other words, supercells. And then I think because of the wind shear profile, they're going to quickly gather themselves into a unified outflow, meaning that they're going to turn into linear events as we get into the late afternoon and evening hours. I am quite curious what pushes through Illinois, of course. That's where I live, and so I want to know if we are going to get by tonight these storms rolling through here. It's State Fair season, so I know that the Illinois State Fair starts at the end of this week. I'd like to go on Saturday. I'll see if I can get over there. But anyway, watch what happens the next day on Friday. The low curls up out of Montana, moves into the Canadian Prairie. And look, this is the northern domain of the high-res NAM, so you're not going to see this rainfall up here. But my goodness, it's trying to slam the Red River Valley with a pretty nasty squall line. And then later, this is that 6 p.m. Friday night, it's trying to line this whole thing out across parts of Minnesota back towards South Dakota, and eventually Wisconsin and Iowa are all getting in the mix of this. So I just want to make you very aware of these threat areas. Make sure you have multiple modes of action to get severe weather information today in those areas, tomorrow here, and then as we get into the day on Saturday here. All right. Okay. Bigger picture. I continue to work on these maps. I can't wait to update my website with all of them. But take a look at the total precip. All right. As we play it out, there's that desperately needed rain that's getting into the Canadian Prairie. This is, by the way, about a 1 week forecast, what I've just shown you here. We have the rain coming through the Corn Belt. We have this drier region in through here that's going to stay relatively dry, I think, for a while. I mean, we could get some storms in here, but overall the models are drier. Also a drier pocket on the backside of this, and just no indication at all of a southwest monsoon. By the way, the update I made yesterday, now when you hover, you get your rainfall in inches and millimeters, so that when I make these maps global, you'll be able to see what they look like all over the world. And if you want to use imperial units or if you want to use metric, I don't care. It's both there. And hopefully that's going to be a useful addition. But then take a look. The farther out we go, this is next Saturday, getting all the way out here to Wednesday the 20th. There's a couple of neat features that show up. One, if you just kind of narrow down some corridors, this is our wettest and stormiest corridor. Here, when we look north, there's that drier stretch in between. And then you can see there's quite a bit of storm activity over the southeast, including Florida. And then at the very end of this animation, watch here and here. We have a couple of tropical events we need to consider and just talk about. Now, they're way out there in the forecast, but they've been there for a while. They're not even yet showing up in the National Hurricane Center's site, right? Because they do a 7-day map. So they're primarily just watching this event here that's got a 60% chance of developing. But given the proximity of this system's development to the Bermuda High, which I think is sliding over more toward the Azores, the likelihood of that system staying out to open ocean is high. What's developing off of the Carolina coast, which could get into this area, again, not a major factor for the United States. And Dexter, which is still at tropical storm strength, is going to be moving on off to open ocean, possibly impacting Europe with its remnants. That's been pretty well established, and I think the meteorologists around the U.S. have really kind of hammered away at this map. What we are all curious about is this right here. This satellite animation off the edge of Africa, the deep convection that you see right here, is what we're concerned about becoming the next big wave. So let me show it to you. This is the newest European model forecast, and the wave we're talking about isn't even really going to show up, if it does show up, until like next Wednesday, Thursday, right in through here. See this? Now, is it going to be the trailing low, the lead low? That's still yet to be determined, but I'm already out there a week in the forecast, and that's when we start to see, well, in this particular scenario, the lead low taking shape over the Lesser Antilles to the Greater Antilles, out there around the 16th, 17th, 18th, and the current European model's taken that wave, maybe into the Gulf. That second low right now is being forecast to move here. So we've kind of got two possibilities, and they continue to show up in the forecast models. And it's actually showing up in all of the forecast models that I use out at this range. If we look at the ensemble forecast, all right, so I'm just going to start you on the 15th. We're already out there. So this is post-Dexter, post whatever the heck that next thing was. Look what the ensembles are doing as we get to the 17th, that's the Sunday, 18th, 19th, and 20th. It's attempting to just take whatever's here and send it. Just low pressure developing. Now, again, it's way out there, but it's the right time of year for us to give a nod to these things. What I want to make sure that you hear is we have zero certainty about this. So whatever you may see on a Facebook post, or if sometimes we just have meteorologists that get super hyped about these things and want to blow them up so their channel gets views. Listen, just take it with a grain of salt, and I'm going to give you the rule of thumb. Anything over 200 hours, I would almost tell you not to trust it. But if you start to see model consistencies run to run, and then consistency between different models, well, we have to talk about it. And what I'm seeing is the dominant area of high pressure is back over toward the Azores, okay? And there's something coming out here, and we have no idea where it's going to end up. Fun now, though, is that we have the ensemble of the artificial intelligence model. And it is also, look at this. This is, again, the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th. And it's just got, hey, a hurricane for you and a hurricane for you. It's just really blowing things up here. So we need to be aware of this. Now, what is the real tempered view of this setup? Go to the next 10 days. That's 240 hours. And we're just going to look at probabilities. And what I want you to see is the models are just suggesting that as we get out there well into next week, maybe next weekend, watch this area. Okay, that's just it. We're going to continue to monitor it, but you've seen the models. Now we can just do some comparison day to day to see if it's there or not. Remembering that in previous runs, back in July especially, the models were trying to make big hurricanes to hit Florida or the East Coast or even New York City, and they didn't manifest. But in August, we have to give them more consideration. That's the narrative, okay? That's all we're going to have for the narrative. All right, with all that being said, can we come back to the U.S. and just think about something a little different here? I want to show you the wind field. There are stronger winds that are going to be showing up in the central plains of the United States as we work our way toward the end of this weekend. And you can see that as that front comes through, I'm just rocking back and forth over today through Saturday. We're expecting wind gusts here to be going, 40, maybe 50 miles an hour at times in this area. These are synoptic scale winds, all right? Not thunderstorm generated. Also take note of the stronger winds that have stayed and have been there for months off of the California coast. I just bring this up because if there are areas that miss out on some of the rainfall, with the heat that I'm going to show you coming in here, this is going to really increase those evaporation rates, and we just need to be cognizant of what that might mean going forward. I also want to show you this, the GFS, which is a model I didn't show you yet. Let's get out there toward the end. It's doing that with one tropical system, and there's the next one. So you see, it is all the models attempting to generate something to come through there. But since I mentioned the evaporation rates, let's go look at that real quick. This is the FRET data. So this is like total forecast of evaporation. And you can see how it's getting higher in this area. And that's that part of that spot that I think from there through here has dryness in the forecast. All right. Okay, from this point, let me show you this. We're going to do a multi-model analysis of week 2. I'm going to start on Monday the 18th. Now, this is the upper level pattern. Like, where's the hurricane? Well, we're looking up in the upper levels of the atmosphere. The GFS ensemble looks like this. I should have a new one here. There we go. The European ensemble looks like that. So these are actually pretty similar, right? Some sort of trough in the Gulf of Alaska, broad washed out ridging that's anchored here, all right? But the artificial intelligence is a bit more active. Oh, and it has that tropical system. What I mean by that is it doesn't have the trough living in the Gulf of Alaska. It's moving the pattern. And what I'm finding interesting about this is what it's doing for the week 2 forecast. Let's get those all updated, yeah. So you can see the European model is still stormy in the similar corridors, both in its ensemble version and in its AI version. And the GFS is not exactly wet here, but it's got a corridor that's a bit wetter as you come down the Mississippi Valley into the southeast. Okay. Interesting that is the difference between the models when I showed you a moment ago that this is what they look like in terms of the height field. So what this tells me is that even though the ensemble averages are washing out useful information, several of the ensemble members must be taking something through this corridor in order to keep it as wet as you see there. All right, so just something to consider. That's that wash, rinse, repeat kind of attitude I've had toward it. So if we flip this over to the other side of the discussion, it's going to be about heat. We've now seen more heat advisories spread throughout parts of the Red River Valley, coming up through parts. This is kind of the whole of the Ogallala Aquifer area here. And then there's red flag warnings to the west, excessive heat watches and warnings down in parts of the southwest. Temperatures today are cranking already at 6:30 as I'm recording this morning Central Time. 96 in Phoenix. but 78 in Kansas City, 77 in St. Louis, and very, very warm temperatures last night, surviving the overnight hours. Today we're expecting to peak out St. Louis 94, Kansas City 96, and then come over to this part of Kansas, Nebraska, getting it down toward Amarillo, all the way back to Denver, the Front Range here, looking at 100 degrees. Very, very hot. Cool in the southeast, cloud cover, just rain there. There's the front that is associated with the next low coming out of Montana, so watch. That's Friday's temps, still a scorcher here. Getting into Saturday, the heat builds in, so I don't know if I'm going to go to the fair or not. If it's going to be in the mid-90s, it's always fair weather. That's pretty normal. Okay, front comes through. I love fairs, by the way. Food is good. People watching is amazing. And have a good time. That would be Monday, okay? And then Tuesday. Take note of the corners of the country, the northeast and northwest. Very hot into early next week, on Monday. In both places, triple digits in the Willamette Valley and also here into the northeast. Very, very hot. Overall, there's not much change in the models. There's your next 5 days. That's day 5 through 10. So something is suggested to come through here to keep this active and cool, much warmer to the south. And then all the way out to day 10 through 15, it's a very similar outlook. So a lot of this mid-August time frame carries a warmer bias if you're in this area, kind of coast to coast overall. All right, so let's get into the end of this. A few things I'm considering. We talked earlier in the week about how we expect weak La Nina conditions to persist. I do think it is interesting that over the last week or so, we've seen a lot of cool water show up here off the East Coast. That could be an important factor going forward with tropical development, but very warm where we're expecting to see the new systems develop. So let me rephrase that. It's been warming up in that area. Also, just take note of the very warm water that's shown up over the last week across the west coast of the United States. But what I'm interested in overall is I'm trying to draw some sort of connection between what's happening elsewhere around the world and what it could do to the U.S. Going forward and Canada. So we've been discussing for a while that we were going to leave from July MJO 5-6 and sweep over to phase 1 and 2 and spend some time here. These are the forecast runs from the short term, the next 2 weeks, from the European, and then the longer range, the 45-day outlook. But there are other sources of measuring the MJO, and one of them comes from the Bureau of Meteorology out of Australia. And we often reference this, even though I don't show it to you, but this is their current update, and they're suggesting we get a lot of phase 1, 2, 3 behavior here at relatively higher amplitude. Now, the higher the amplitude, often I want to give it more of a nod, like, hey, this might be a more dominant control of the pattern. And remember, what this means is our best convection is going to be somewhere in the Indian Ocean. And that's going to drive where the heat and momentum leave the tropics and move their way toward both poles. And just remember, this is kind of this is the birthplace of heat movement, I guess is the right way to say it, in the entirety of the atmosphere. It's fundamental, first principle atmospheric science type stuff. Now, we know from history what can happen in August and September, and let's look at a couple of different examples of it. If you get into August and you start to see MJO phase 2, phase 3 type action, it just tends to give us more troughs in the Gulf of Alaska and just a bit more flow that comes through like this, which means I would expect to see more storms in Canada and more storms kind of running over the edge. So I know I'm kind of making a messy map, but I'd expect to see a lot more activity like that. The other interesting thing about this is take a look at this upper level wind. This could be important for steering any tropical systems through the Caribbean into the Gulf if this is the way, based on historical regressions, the MJO phase 2, phase 3 thing gets going. All right. Now, it's not just these folks that do these maps. We often go to this Italian site that can show you these same things. So look, phase 2, we tend to have troughs here, right? General broader ridging there, but troughs in the Gulf of Alaska, and systems get sent through. That's phase 2. This is phase 2 in September. All right, so see this? Now, what does this all mean? Well, I'm just going to make a case here. I don't think the models have picked up on it. And you're saying, what do you mean? Well, this is the August 10 to September 10 outlook. And if I modified it, I would say there's better flow coming through here. This makes a lot of sense to me, but I would still open up that corridor to more precip. In fact, I'd probably include more of this region getting in on some of these storms. Now, this is an artifact of the European model. There's something going on with it in the Gulf Stream. It's always there, and so let's not look at that and assume anything. That's a weird artifact, but this isn't, and that's something that I'm quite interested in. Do we start to see, as we get more into late August and September, some tropical development, in this area? That's something I want to be on the lookout for. Now, when I said I'm a bit perplexed, it's because the GFS, same time period, is just not doing this. It's actually got more of Canada dry. It's got this whole area drier. It's got an active southwest monsoon, and we've been questioning that now for several weeks. So I just want to, I'm going to say, all right, but is there anything similar? Yeah, that. I want to watch right down here, please. Let's keep an eye on that area as we finish the month of August and get into September for some sort of tropical development, okay? All right, last thing I want to do is just this. What we've got here is an animation that goes back over the last 90 days and looks at these ocean temperatures. We've got an event that's taking shape in the Pacific with strong trade winds. We have also one over here in the Atlantic. You can see the stronger trade winds giving you some upwelling here. This has kind of been referred to as a Atlantic Niño event, but the two are correlated with respect to the strength of the trades. Now, if I focus on what's happening in the west, this very warm water across the North Pacific, it's got a story to it. Matt and I are working on trying to explain why we have to be very careful using a PDO index going forward. The long-term systematic increase in temperatures in the North Pacific cannot be ignored, and I believe it's ruining one of our most important metrics, which is something called the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. I'll come back to that in future videos. I'm excited about that, but I want to have a downtime in the forecast to really dig into it. Well, what I'm going to show you is this. If you historically correlate August, September, and October with a developing La Nina, you tend to get your best moisture, your best rising motion here, Indonesia, Australia. Okay, this area tends to go over active as well. That's the negative correlation there. So now you see why I'm going to keep an eye on this region? I think there's something going on there. We tend to have a weaker southwest monsoon, and you can see the dryness that tends to extend in this area. But we tend to put flow over the top of it, and it tends to come into this region with better storms. Now you can look across the rest of the country, or rest of the world, and kind of draw your own conclusions. But I want to do something else real quick. Let's go from August, September, October to, well, we can just jump to October, November, December, and let's plot that. Because what we're going to see here now is maybe the way that fall into early winter may end up looking. So hopefully this will show up relatively quickly, or maybe I should have brought it up before I started. But again, what we're trying to assess is, does this developing weak, La Nina have some sort of merit or control on the fall pattern? Overall, whenever we start to develop a fall La Nina, again, we watch the tropics carefully, maybe the Caribbean. We tend to go a little bit drier. Now again, this is October, November, December across the south. We get really active farther to the north as the jets tend to become more variable coming out of the North Pacific. What I also want to know is, do we in fact, during this critical time period for South America, go drier here and have wetter conditions farther to the north? This would mean an active and early start to their growing season, maybe more in October versus November, whereas we start to see drier conditions build in here coming out of Argentina into southern Brazil. That's a typical La Nina pattern. But take note, these correlations are not like 1 or -1. They're in the middle here, meaning there's a lot of variance when you go to look at these statistics. So we'll just leave it at that. Matt will talk to you tomorrow. You all have a good rest of your day, and we'll chat soon. Thanks.